What's going on, everybody? It's Nabel J. Lee with the Buzz at Buzzworthy Radio. I had the chance to sit down and speak with Sara Friedman, who stars in the indie film Heightened, and this was one of my favorite conversations that I got to have with anybody on the show. And don't get me wrong, I have so many wonderful conversations with everybody that stops on this show, but this one in particular struck with me because we get to talk about mental health and mental health stigma, especially since the character that Sarah plays in the movie deals with mental health issues. The character had a mental health breakdown. So, getting the chance to talk about this in this kind of capacity on my show really was very therapeutic for me, especially I never made any qualms about it. I do speak about it publicly about having a mental breakdown myself at one point in my life, and having another person to get to talk to about this in this kind of a space was it was wonderful to speak about. So I hope you guys get the pleasure of that from this as well. So here it is, our interview with Sara Friedman. Check it out. I heard the description of this movie and I felt like this is probably something that's going to resonate with me a little bit. So,
Yeah.
can we talk about the movie real quick? Let's give a synopsis of this. And I can't wait to talk about who's in it because I'm so excited at who you have in this movie too.
Great cast, yeah.
So from our understanding of it, your character in this suffered a mental breakdown
Hmm.
and now your character's back and living with your parents.
Yes.
And they're not really close. They're
There's
not
some
really. I try to be nice with it as much as I could, but so I thought that was the best way of saying it. You're not exactly
they're
close.
not exactly close. Yep, there's
Yes.
some tension, there's some discomfort around the subject of mental illness.
Hmm. And I believe your character meets someone else, and I guess somehow you guys connect a little bit.
So basically she has to do some so she has a mental
Soul
breakdown.
searching, maybe?
Yeah, she has a mental breakdown while taking the bar exam.
Yeah.
Um, and ends up having to volunteer at a state park where she is shadowing a park ranger who maybe had some issues of his own. So the two of them are sort of able to help each other with a lot of hijinks along the way.
Mm. So for even though it is, I know it's marketed as a comedy, but I feel like it is definitely a big, I don't want to say stigma, but it is a topic regarding mental illness. And I've said it on my show before, and I'm very public about it. I am an advocate for mental health. I had a mental breakdown myself in real life at work. So when I do see things like this conveyed in film and on television, I always look to it one just to make I was always that person to go like, oh, hopefully it's portrayed accurately, but I'm also intrigued like for this when you're using mental health and you're also incorporating humor into it
Yeah.
in some capacity, you're able to look at this and you're able to laugh at it. So I appreciate the fact that you are telling this story on such a topic that I feel like has so much stigma.
And that was a huge, two things that you just touched on were a huge goal of mine. Number one, just destigmatizing in general, right? The more we talk about anything, the more acceptable or socially aware people become.
Hmm.
But the comedy, so I have, struggled with anxiety, OCD, basically since I was a young kid. So this
Hmm.
is, while I did not pull a fire alarm during a bar exam in my real life.
Fair enough.
This is a fictionalized character, which I do have to tell people sometimes. But not quite me.
Disclaimer, this is
Yeah,
not a real character.
this is not Sara Friedman. But elements of both Nora and Dusty, the two main characters, come from my life and my experiences with
Hmm.
mental health and mental illness. And
Yeah.
one thing, that I really didn't want to do was just make like a sad, depressing movie
Right.
about mental illness. And I remember, several years ago when Silver Linings Playbook came out, and I was so appreciative of the way that movie there's a hysterical scene where they're listing all of the different anti-anxiety medications and antidepressants they've tried. And I
Hmm.
was like, see, we're laughing and we're destigmatizing and we're making it normal, but it's also funny. Like sometimes my
Funny.
friends and I are like, oh, me and Prozac don't get along. And it's a hilarious conversation. So it's like, incorporating that real life lightness was very important to me.
I well, first of all, thank you for sharing your story about that because, another thing that while we talk about the stigma, it's also encompassing that it's something that people don't like to talk about with
Yeah.
anybody else, let alone a stranger. And I I love the fact that especially in more recent years, people are becoming more open about their mental health. They're expressing what they are going through, and I keep encouraging people to do that. So I thank you for sharing your story. But I do tend to sometimes this when it comes to mental health, I agree with you on the aspect of let's not have it be such a if we were to do it in a film or a television scope, let's not have it be 100% depressing about it. And, we want to make it lively. We want to, because the point of it, as my last guest talked about, we want to entertain you. So
Yeah.
we don't want to, obviously, we want to entertain you, but we also want to have the message incorporated into it. So we don't have to have it be in this scope. We can have it be to where you can laugh at it and you can laugh about it because I'm sure there are certain even as much as fictionalized it can be, there are certain things in it that you have experienced yourself, and then it could probably cause you to look at it and smile and go like, "Oh my God, that is actually funny."
Right. And I mean, I've had moments in my life where I've been freaking out and I'm like, okay, this is going to be hysterical tomorrow. I can feel that right now, that this moment is going to be hysterical
Yeah.
very soon. And that can help get you through. And I also will say, in the film, her parents are very uncomfortable with talking about mental illness. And
Yeah.
I I am able to talk about it because it was never a taboo in my household. So me, Sara Friedman.
You, Sarah Freeman. Okay.
Yeah, me, Sara Friedman. It was never a taboo in my household. My parents talked about it all the time. My dad was, as neurotic as I am, probably more. So, it was the reason I'm able to sit here and go, oh, yeah, I have anxiety, I have OCD, and
Hmm.
feel no shame around that is because that's the example that my parents set for me.
Absolutely. And the parents in the film are played by Sarah Clarke, Xander
Hmm.
Berkeley. Oh my God. I was like, when I heard that, when I first was pitched it, I was like, oh my God, I love them.
And they're married in real life.
And they're married in real life. Yes, they
Yeah.
are. First of all, let me ask you these two questions. How long did the concept from pen to paper come to fruition? When were you able to sit back and say, like, this is actually happening? How long did that process take? And then secondly, what was your reaction when you got them to play your parents on the movie?
Yeah, well, so this is a little bit interesting because I actually made this as a short film in 2015. It was the very short film, the very first thing I ever directed. I had been an actor and I knew that I really wanted, and I had done theater directing in college. I studied theater directing. I knew I wanted to try out film. So I made this short film in 2015 and I considered that like my film school. And
Sure.
then I went on to work in the industry, worked on a lot of features, directed a bunch more shorts, and I kept coming back to these characters. So I was like, you know what? My first feature should be heightened. I should write it into a feature. So I started writing the feature in probably 2018,
Hmm.
um, and with the hopes to shoot in 2020. That
Of
obviously didn't
course.
happen, but we managed to shoot in 2021.
Okay.
So and it's out now. So like 9 years from short to feature. However, when I made the short, I had no idea that I was ever gonna make it a feature.
Right.
But I've been living with the characters for that long, the two main characters, Nora and Dusty, at least.
Nora and Dusty. Yep.
Yeah. And then yeah, so when I heard that, so I had not met Sarah and Xander before the film, but we do have a Maine connection. They live in Maine now most of the time. They do come
Okay.
to LA all the time for work.
First of all, shout out. I love Maine. I went there for work for 2 weeks. It was beautiful. I loved it. The food
It's
was amazing. Just shouting that out there. Go ahead.
Everybody go to Maine. Um, so Sarah and Xander live there now. I grew up there. We were shooting there. And I just had my casting director reach out to them. And they are such huge champions of smaller independent films, especially in Maine. They want to try to get that scene going. You know, to have actors of that caliber do a smaller project like this was
Hmm.
really remarkable, and they're so generous with their time and their attention. They're really, I mean, it was such a joy to work with them. They never were like, why is this young director telling us what to do, right? They were
Yeah.
just okay, cool. Hey, like here's an idea. And I'm like, you know what? That's better.
Yeah,
But
let's run with it. Yeah.
yeah, they were so I was so thrilled. And actually the location that is their house in the movie
Mhm.
was about 4 minutes from their actual house. So they were like, it was like next to their daughter's school. They would like drop her off to school, roll up to set. They were like, this is perfect. So it really was a joy.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. And the other part of it too, we talked about the food in Maine obviously is good, but the views in Maine itself were absolutely beautiful when I visited there and gotten the chance to do that. It's just it's a beautiful state. I encourage anybody, if you ever get the chance to visit Maine, please do so. It's absolutely glorious. And the film is streaming now on Apple TV Plus and Prime Video, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yes. So pretty much anywhere you get video on demand, you get Heightened. So Apple TV, Prime Video, and then all sorts of cable and satellite video on demand as well.
Oh my, well, everybody, guys, now that you know where to watch it, you gotta check it out. Please do so. I encourage you. And one last thing before we wrap up here, I just want to call out this point that you just made. Um, Indie films, I love the fact that you had just spoken about people wanting to support independent filmmaking. And that is one of the big things that I started doing on this show this year alone, because not that I had not been, I don't want to say a novice, but I was a novice to independent films until around this year. But ever since I really got to talk to filmmakers and directors and actors and writers that are involved in independent films, I got to experience just how not only passionate they are about the project, but how much of that dedication and work that they put into it. And you don't really get to see that on a big budget production. So getting the chance to talk to people who are involved in such projects like this is such a thrill for me because I get to hear the passion in their voice, and I heard it from you just now. So thank you so much for sharing this with me today, not just about the movie, but also your own personal experience that you were able to incorporate into the film. I think that's a huge thing. So thank you so very much for stopping by and talking about Heightened. Please, guys, check it out on any streaming service that you possibly have right now, and you probably have a bunch of them because I do, and I still haven't gotten rid of them. There's always something that keeps me coming back, and this is one of them. So please check it out. Sarah, I really appreciate you stopping by, and we'd love to have you back on anytime.
Thank you so much for having me. Absolutely.
Many thanks to Sara Friedman for stopping by the BUZZCast to talk about Heighten, which you can now watch on all digital streaming platforms, including Apple TV, Amazon Prime, YouTube TV, wherever you watch your streaming movies, you can download it right now and it's at your fingertips. But that's going to do it for me for right now. I'm Novell J. Lee, making sure you keep getting the latest buzz with Buzzworthy Radio by logging on to our website at buzzworthyradiocast.com. You can also find us on X at Buzzworthy Radio and liking us on our Facebook page. I'm also on Instagram and Blue Sky under the name of BuzzNav. And you can download our podcast on iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and finally, Spotify. We'll see you guys next time. Take care.